Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for the Small Business Briefing. It's Thursday, April 29th. I'm Rob Fowler, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan, and my co-host is Brian Calley, the president of SBAM. This briefing is brought to you by HealthScreen and Healthy Visitor, a text-based tool that allows you to do your daily health screening of both employees and visitors, and you can find out more at healthycomply.com. Brian, I think the big news today is the governor had a press conference this morning at 9:30. Really, in some ways, what we've been waiting for. I just want to get your overall reaction to it. We'll dig into it here in just a little bit. We have guests, but just want to get your first take on it.
Well, it's an important development. So for a long time, we had been asking for what the target is, what the goal is in terms of reopening, what metrics had to be hit in order to get some of the rules reduced. And, as we've seen the rules change and as of late reduced somewhat, it was never really clear which of the metrics were most important. And right now it's very clear. It's very straightforward, very simple. One metric, it's vaccines, vaccination rates among the eligible population, mainly adults. And as we hit certain thresholds, then certain things will happen. We will get into that, into the nuts and bolts of that press conference and the order that will come out of it in a few minutes. But first, we have a guest we wanted to spend a little bit of time with.
All right, our guest, Kelly, I'm going to say an old friend of SBAM. Kellie Dean is the president owner of Dean Transportation. Some of you will know that as Dean Trailways. Others might know it as school buses. Kellie, welcome. We wanted to have you come on and just talk a little bit about how this pandemic has affected your business. Maybe just first give us a little overview of the breadth of your business. What all are your business lines?
Well, first of all, Rob and Brian, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. Congratulations for all the great work that you two in particular have continued to do and also during this pandemic. So congratulations, we appreciate you. So we have a couple things going on here at Dean. We're headquartered in Lansing. We have a business called Dean Transportation. It's a family business. It has a 60-year history. I've been the president owner for 35 years now. We service through Dean Transportation, primarily public school systems throughout the state. We have about 130 public schools that we provide yellow school buses for. Now that in most cases is a full service where we buy and own the buses. We hire and train the drivers. The districts give us the names and addresses of the students, and we provide the full service for them. So we service about 85,000 students per day pre-pandemic, and we go about 30 million miles a year on 1,600 buses. To be able to do this, we're very geographically diverse, and we have 50 offices from Metro Detroit to Battle Creek, Grand Rapids, Muskegon, Traverse City, Port Huron, and a lot of places in between. And we've been doing this for a long time. Myself, as an introduction, I'm a Michigan State trained teacher, educator, primarily in special education. I became a school administrator, and that was my career path, was really special education programs and administration here in the Lansing School District and Ingham Intermediate, and was recruited into this yellow school bus business. So I talk every day that we are the transportation side of education. And so that's what we do, and we consider what we do very, very important. We have another business which really coincides. It's not as big, but it's visible in that it's called Dean Trailways of Michigan. So it is a motor coach business, as well as small vehicles, black cars, and so on, where we provide transportation to the general public, to universities and colleges, and many educational organizations that travel with students. Student trips in a normal year would be to Washington, D.C., et cetera. This time of the year, learning about government, et cetera, and One of our largest customers is Michigan State, where they'll travel throughout the Midwest now for their athletic travel. So those are the two, and they coincide very well. We're very honored.
So Kelly, maybe give us a sense for how the businesses have been impacted. I mean, obviously running a business is very complicated these days with staffing and quarantine and that sort of thing, but also the government restrictions, orders that have been imposed, the decisions that are made at the local school level, all the way through to limitations on the types of activities that maybe the Trailways business would take people to.
Sure, Brian. Well, I can tell you that it was March 16th, a year ago in 2020, when all of a sudden, like everyone else, we got the word that there was going to be a shutdown, a stay-home order, and things were really ceasing. In our business, in our world, that meant our primary customer, public school systems, were going to cease. So we kind of made it through because it was the first order was 3 weeks, but then we got to 3 weeks. The remainder of the 2019-20 school year was over. So that was very significant. First time ever. We've experienced snow days. We've never experienced a shutdown where our primary income came from customers that are shutting their doors. So we have spent a lot of time with our customers. We have a better relationship with them ever before because we had to work our way through that first part of the pandemic. But then we get into this next school year, which is the 2020-21 year that we're in right now. And it has been a roller coaster. It has been ups and downs, stops and goes. And from a business standpoint, it has been challenging, but we have tried to be, as the term used, relentlessly positive as we have worked through this. Those that have been really the hardest hit through this whole process have been our employees, because being that our business is public schools, we can't go out and make more widgets. We can't create additional businesses. Our business have literally been shut down. On an average, a majority of our school districts have made great attempts to be back in school. So that's helped us out on the business end very much. But our employees end, not all of them qualified for unemployment. And that was very frustrating. And we have employees still today that have been waiting months to get their first check. And so it's literally survival for a lot of them. So during this time period, I am sorry to say, as much as we love them, many of our employees had to go seek other employment, current employment, because we really did not have a mechanism to help them through this. So that's been difficult. So we are making a valiant effort to recruit them back to the jobs that they loved before, because they came to work for us about making a difference in the lives of kids and being part of a school system and part of our Dean family business. And so we're actively recruiting them back, and many of them are coming back. But from the business end, as that's who we're speaking to today, it has really been a challenge, as everybody out there is struggling with, is that many of our folks, if they received unemployment and they received stimulus checks and they received enough to get by, right now we're not seeing people line up right now to get back to work. We are absolutely right now it's a drought right at the moment, and we're spending a lot of money on radio ads and TV ads and mass marketing and social media. We're doing everything that we think we should do, and we're just not seeing them come out right now. They're the general public, and we're offering career opportunities at a very high end hourly rate with benefits and with a 401k match and all kinds of the right things that folks would want to come in. But it's been a very difficult and challenging time, as I believe it's the listeners on this call are facing the same. The competition for all of us to work together to find new employees, it's really tough, and it's many businesses, but I should just say it's facing us as well. But we have an obligation, and we're laser focused on getting the staff necessary to get the school year started in the fall of this year, 2021, August and September startups, that we're going to be ready, and we're planning the schools will be in full swing at that point in time.
Kelly, it's interesting. Part of what we're trying to do is help put a spotlight on other kinds of businesses that are affected by the policies of our state and the pandemic we find ourselves in. There's so much focus on restaurants, and while absolutely they have been very much negatively affected, you think people probably wouldn't think of your business as the kind of business that would be so affected by this. So, we wanted to make sure your story was told, and we gave you a little bit of time. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for doing what you do. You've been a great friend of SBAM's for a very long time.
Well, you're welcome, and I will continue to be, and so on. And I wish everyone listening the very best of luck. It's just we have to be positive and stay the course, and it's gonna take some time to get back, but it has just been tough. Our greatest challenge, frankly, and I'll be brief here, is that because we have over 500 employees, we didn't qualify for anything. That mark right there just cut us right out, and so we've made it on our own. We've had to create our own destiny, and so we've kept up the fight. But we're hoping that folks that want to get ready to get back to work, we have opportunities for them, and we believe we've got a good opportunity to make a difference in the lives of students across Michigan. So thank you all for just highlighting us, and wish SBAM and all your members the very best.
All right, Kelly, thanks so much. And again, thanks for what you do. You're a great business leader. And
thank you, Rob, and thank you, Brian, very much.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I know that the struggle to find people is something that will be very, very reminiscent to our audience in the struggles that they're having today. And the other thing too, I just want to point out that SBAM doesn't have any better friend and supporter than Kellie Dean. I mean, there's as you can hear, Ben has built a great business, and it's gone from small to not so small anymore. And yet he hasn't forgotten about his roots and the support of entrepreneurs and the mission of creating a great environment of success around entrepreneurs of all sizes, and especially those that are connected to SBAM. So thanks for all that you do to support our mission.
Well, thank you, Brian. Very kind words. Thank you so much, and best to all the SBAM members.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Brian, let's dig into this. I was going to say executive order, but it's not even that. It really is just some guidelines on how we go forward with as vaccine-driven, some metrics and some benchmarks. Let's kind of unpack this thing a little bit, because I think it really was, it's what we've been hoping for, maybe not perfectly, but certainly something we've been looking forward to.
Yeah, so we've wanted to see benchmarks for a long time. What's the goal that we're striving for? And we got those today. And the nice thing is that the benchmarks are very simple and straightforward. It's always a little bit controversial when you since the benchmark is actually a single benchmark, which is vaccination. There's a little bit of a caveat we'll talk about in a few minutes. But the idea is, once you hit 55% of eligible adults being vaccinated, then the return to office will be green lighted. Actually, it's 2 weeks after we hit that 55% threshold. But the thing that I was quite relieved about is that it's 55% of those who are eligible to receive the vaccine, so 16 and up. It's not 55% of the entire population. If that was the threshold, if the benchmark started at 55% of the entire population, I would have been quite discouraged by this action, because I think those goals would be too far out into the future. But as we stand today, at 48.8% of that population receiving at least its first dose, we find ourselves, 6 or 7% away from this first benchmark being hit. And so I think that's very attainable. Then it goes to 60%. 60% is the place where those indoor capacities start to get raised up for things like convention centers and reception halls and indoor entertainment venues. And so it and then also like fitness facilities have been at 25%. They would go up to 50%. So there's several aspects of capacity limits that will go up at 60%. At 65%, plus 2 weeks. So in each of these cases, you hit the threshold, you got to wait 2 weeks for the immunity to kick in. You hit the threshold plus 2 weeks, then it lifts all indoor capacity limits, requiring only social distancing between parties. Now, remember, this is what we had wanted at the beginning, was don't just set an arbitrary capacity limit. If you want to have distancing requirements, do it that way, and then people can design their flow of work to match that. And then at 70%, that's when, it doesn't say explicitly that the epidemic order will just go away at that point, but at 70% is where there would no longer be broad mitigation measures unless you saw additional waves in the future. So, for example, at 70% of the eligible population, there'd no longer be a face mask requirement for the including indoors. So. These are the benchmarks. The one caveat, though, to it all is that if there is a region, remember there's 8 regions from the Michigan Economic Recovery Council. We talk about these MERC regions from time to time. If new cases remain greater than 250 on a 7-day average, 250 per million cases on a 7-day average, then steps 2 and 3 could be delayed. So, when you hit that 60% or the 65% in particular regions, they could be delayed. Looking at the numbers, though, and the trends and how fast the cases are dropping, I don't see this being an option. I mean, I think that the cases will drop below those thresholds everywhere in our state before we hit the vaccine benchmarks. So, in the near future, probably won't come into play, but just something to keep in mind that there is a caveat, something that could stop for future steps from being taken at exactly the point when the vaccine thresholds are met.
A couple of things we've been doing during this entire pandemic is watching the data, which, this is really totally pegged to vaccinations, and watching what's going on in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, because it's been instructive as well. A couple of other states are making big moves here in the last few days. Tennessee, New York, what's going on out there that maybe it's worth watching?
Yeah, what's interesting about, as I watch what's happening around the country and around the world in other states, New York and Tennessee, these are not similar states. Okay, they're not similar politically, they're not similar in terms of how their populations and so forth, but both have announced and are taking pretty aggressive steps toward returning to generally normal life. So in Tennessee, they have ended the emergency status. And so that's a big step. It means that they go back to whatever the rules are, the rules that go through the regular process, as opposed to emergency orders to make the rules move quickly and go outside of the regular process. In New York, both in New York City and in New York State, they're taking different actions, lifting the curfews. So remember, like our bars have a curfew at 11 o'clock in Michigan at what used to be 10 o'clock. So in New York, it's midnight. So they'll be lifting the curfews in May. They'll do the outside first, and then after that, inside curfews at the end of May. And then but in terms of the capacity limitations, they have announced that they'll be fully reopened by July 1st. And so what they're saying is that regardless of vaccination status and how many people have received vaccines, once they've been available for a certain period of time, then it's time to reopen, and people either got the vaccine or they didn't get the vaccine. Now, I will say though that there is less vaccine hesitancy in New York. So I think when the public policymakers there are making decisions, they're kind of assuming that they're going to have a ramp up and they're not going to hit a wall as soon as other states, including Michigan, do. So, so I don't want to overstate the fact that they've just picked a date in the future, that's so different because they have, one of their factors, which is less vaccine hesitancy overall.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We've been watching vaccines and reporting it on what we have called Data Monday. Can we check in quickly on where we are? You mentioned we're at 48.8% to a 55% goal. So that's one important piece of information. But we're trending. We have been trending well.
Yeah, and so things have definitely started to slow down. So let's take a look at some current data on where we're at. So this will be a familiar slide. We normally look at this update on Mondays, so we're going to take a look at it on today a little bit earlier. So total vaccines had gotten up to 95,000 on average. We saw it drop in the previous report to 87.8, now dropped further to 73.7 thousand. These are total doses. My main concern,
right?
Per day, total doses per day, 73,000, almost 74,000 is what the average was in the previous week. But here's the thing. The first doses have dropped more than that. So this blue line is the first dose, the red line is the second dose. So all of these metrics that we were talking about in terms of 55, 60, 65, 70%, those are all based on first dose. So it doesn't require the second dose be received in order for the metric. And I think that the governor looked at this red line and said, you know what, actually we have really high second dose compliance. It's higher than the national average, actually by quite a bit. And the national average is pretty good. Michigan's is even higher. So I think there was some comfort that, hey, if you get the first dose, there's a very, very high likelihood that the second dose will happen. Problem is the first doses are dropping off pretty substantially. So I'm concerned, if this number drops much lower than 30,000 a day, then reaching these benchmarks is going to get really difficult. So so that's kind of the big if there. So let's take a look. This one just separates out the first doses so you can get a sense in what the drop in first doses has been. 209,000 over a given week. Wasn't that long ago when that was a pretty impressive result. But we're just coming off from a real string of over 300, almost 400,000. We were only near 400,000 1 week. So I just want to point out that if you look at this 1 week and compares to today, it looks like this huge drop. But if you look at our kind of average overall, it's still a drop and a substantial one, but not quite as big. It is my hope, though, that we're seeing a plateau that we can try to build from, as opposed to something that keeps on dropping week over week. Looking at the age categories, not surprisingly, the older ages have been more motivated to get the vaccine, and it's been available to them for longer. So those populations have already exceeded the overall state average, but I think that getting those numbers higher are still going to be important. The most at-risk population, so you want it naturally to be higher, but also that's going to help make up for some of the shortages that we have down here in these age groups in terms of the shortage in demand in the younger age groups. So, but it is still climbing in these areas, and I think that not all of this reduction is from hesitancy. I think that some of it is just a matter of priority. If you're of a certain age and the risk is lower, your priority to get in there and do whatever you got to do to get it scheduled and make it happen, just not quite as high. So I think that the more convenient we can make it, the more we'll push these numbers up. Here's just a screenshot of the state website that shows of the populations that are eligible. So there's about 8.1 million people that are eligible to receive the vaccine. 48.8% have received it. And here's what the glide path looks like in terms of the vaccine. but note that, over here in this area within the last week, most of the last week's data for May 1st, of course, has not been included in there. So it looks like it levels off and stays the same for the last week. It doesn't really, that's just a data reporting issue. So we'll take another look at this next week and see, to see whether or not it's, or see how much it's dropping off. But it's my hope that we don't see it continue to decline, but instead maybe plateau. And if that's the case, if we can keep at this current pace, that 55% threshold is something that we could hit, by the second or third week in May. I mean, maybe. And then what'll happen is that it'll be 2 weeks after that point when it'll be returned to office. You might remember, I didn't know that this particular order was coming, but I thought that we'd get in June, we'd get the new office, we'd be returning to office, or at least allow us to return to office in June. It looks like that's probably how it's going to turn out. Michigan is still number one. Remember, I told you 250 cases per million was the caveat. So we need this number here to be below 250. And it looks like it's way higher than 250 now, and it is, but it's dropping quickly. So I expect that we are actually, in this gap between number one and number two has gotten a lot smaller. So I think that in the next 3 weeks, we're gonna see it fall well below that 250 across the country as well. Great changes here. This is the New York Times, down 20. The case count, the average daily case count is down 24% in America. So this year, it doesn't look like it's that much, but the number is relatively low compared to the peaks. But that's a 24% decline here in daily case count. So that's another good sign that it's unusual for, when the whole country is going one direction. I think that's further evidence that we're likely to continue to go down because most of the country is. And then hospitalization is also going down for the majority of the country. And just to make sure that you realize that on vaccinations, that Michigan is not alone. This is what the country as a whole looks like in terms of its vaccination, average daily vaccinations as well. So we are in, I think that we're in decent shape to hit that first and second benchmark, but I'm concerned about the second benchmark that makes wedding reception and meeting venues more possible or sustainable, because we don't know exactly when it's going to hit. So how are people going to schedule weddings and conventions and things like that when we don't know when the 60% is going to get hit? Hopefully, though, it's some motivation. Anybody out there who's not received their vaccination, it will make a big difference for other business owners if you do. So please do.
All right, we only have a couple of minutes left. Let's go into the speed round. I want to get to a couple of things. We've been talking about some activity at the state legislature level, the push to sort of reinstate the seeking employment requirement for unemployment. Any movement on that?
There was a hearing with the Oversight Committee. We had a member of ours, actually, that our members would be familiar with, Patty Eisenbraun, who testified and did an amazing job. But the idea is we need the work search requirement added back to unemployment. I think it was a great hearing. I think there's a good chance. It looks like the department is heading that direction. So hopefully it'll happen soon. But if you're on unemployment, you should be required to be looking for work. And that's how it traditionally is. And we're pushing really hard to get that reinstated.
This is the issue that Kellie Dean was talking about. It's hard to get people to come back to work. And so one of the kind of creative ideas that we're hearing about at the state legislature is literally paying people to go back to work. Does that get any traction?
The House Republicans came out with a plan, which is kind of an alternative to before. Remember, we were advocating for put money in the unemployment fund to make up for the fraud payments and that sort of thing. And the governor had vetoed it several times. And so they have come up with a different idea. So if we can't get money put into the fund, then maybe we can reduce the money coming out of the fund by getting more people back to work. So the idea is give a $1,000 bonus to anybody who's on unemployment who takes a job and keeps a job. And so it's an innovative approach. It's using the unemployment system as an incentive to go back to work, as opposed to what it has been, frankly, which has been a disincentive to go back to work.
Also, we're coming up on an interesting deadline or maybe opportunity for those restaurants in particular. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund that came in the last round of funding, $28.6 billion. That registration for the portal actually opens tomorrow at 9 a.m. It's a two-part process. You have to register for the portal first, and you can apply starting Monday, the 3rd at noon. It's in the first 21 days of applications will be, all applications will be taken, but the first 21 days, they'll focus on those who are women-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned, or those who come from a disadvantaged area. And this one is interesting. It's literally 2019 gross receipts minus 2020 gross receipts minus a PPP. That's what you're eligible for. So we're just encouraging, if you're a restaurant and you need to pay attention to this one, or if you know somebody who's a restaurant, we think this money will go pretty quickly, $28 billion. But so pay attention to that one. I'm going to save this for Monday, Brian. On Monday, we've been talking a little bit about, will there be a national OSHA standard, or do we see that remaining kind of at the state level? It looks as though there may be something coming from Washington. We're one of 14 states that has a state level OSHA organization, so we may get it coming from both directions. We'll unpack that a little bit more on Monday. There is a 3-part series we're doing on the future of work starting in May 6th. It'll be the first 3 Thursdays in May from 11 to 12 on the future of work. It's done with our partners at Consumer Credit Union, and we appreciate their sponsorship. That is all we have for you today. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back here on Monday at 3 o'clock. In the meantime, have a great weekend. Remember to wash your hands.
And don't touch your face. We'll see you on Monday.